Okay, we are now going to do the translation review for Unit 9. This is the sugya that discusses the line in the Mishnah, the halacha in the Mishnah, that you are patur if someone puts out a barrel in a shurabim and someone steps on it. The person who steps in it and breaks it is patur. The Gemara is going to question that assumption, and based on that assumption is going to come up with a couple of different interpretations of the Mishnah. The Gemara is then going to question one of those interpretations, going to defend that challenge, and then we're going to have another approach to this whole question in the first place. Let's get started so it makes more sense. So the Gemara begins with a quote from the Mishnah, Uba acher v'nitkaba v'shira patur. Right, if someone else comes along and trips on it and breaks it, you're patur for the person who trips on it and broke it is patur for breaking it. Again, because the owner was the one who put it there. So the Gemara challenges this halacha with a very simple question. Amai patur, why is this person patur? Iba'i he should have, he needs to, li yunei mezil, to watch where he's going. Okay, so how could you say, I understand that the owner of the object put the object in public, but that doesn't give the right for people walking not to pay attention to where they're walking. Shouldn't they have to watch where they're going? Isn't there a certain responsibility towards a human being to do that? And therefore they should be, the person who trips on and breaks it should be chayav. In order to solve this problem, we have three different solutions, each one representing what's called, and if you remember correctly from class, an ukimta. Ukimta. And the way an ukimta works is that it takes a statement, either a Mishnah or a Braita or a statement from an Amora, a mahalachic statement, and it says it limits it and says, no, this statement only applies in a specific situation, in a specific context. And that's how you're going to solve the problem. So when the Gemara asks, Imai patur ibayle liyunei mezil, sure watch where they're going. So the Gemara is going to have three different possibilities of showing us situations where a person wouldn't have to watch where they're going. Yes, normally you have to watch where you're going, but the Mishnah must be talking about situation X where you don't have to watch where you're going. What are those three ukimtas? So we begin. Amrei debe Rav, mishmei de Rav. So it was said in the students of Rav said in Rav's name, b'memalei reshut harabim kula chaviyot. When the person filled the public area completely with barrels, meaning the whole Reshut HaRabim was blocked with barrels. Therefore, you have no way of getting around it other than stepping on and break it, and therefore you're patur. You're not responsible to watch where you're going, because then even if you watch where you're going, you're blocked. Shmuel said, "Ba'afela shanu." In the dark, it literally means in the dark. This was taught. Okay, the Mishnah was taught. The halacha in the Mishnah was teaching about a case where it was in the dark, and therefore normally, even though a person has to watch where they're going, we're talking about a scenario where it was dark out, and therefore you can't be held responsible to watch where you're going because you can't see. Rav Yochanan said bekeren zavid. It's where it's around the corner, meaning the barrel is right around the corner, and a person steps around the corner before their head comes around. So even if you watch where you're going, you're going to end up stepping on this barrel and breaking it. Therefore, it's not considered to be your fault, because it has nothing to do with watching where you're going or not. So we end up here is with three different ukimtas. Each one, they're not necessarily arguing with one another, but they each have a different way of saying, yes, normally a person has to watch where they're going, but in this case they don't have to, because it's a case of X, a case of Y, it's in the dark, or it's around the corner, or you're completely blocked by a barrel. So let's read it one more time. My patur, why you patur? You should have liyunei mezil, watch where he's going. Amri debe Rav, mishmei de Rav. The students of Rav said in Rav's name, b'memalei reshut harabim kula chaviyot, where he filled the reshut harabim completely with battles. Shmuel said ba'afela shanu. We're talking about in the dark. Rav Yochanan amar bekeren zavid. We're talking about where it was around the corner. So now that we have these three approaches, the Gemara is going to take issue with one of these approaches, namely the first approach of Rav, that the entire area was filled with barrels, and that's the case the Mishnah is talking about. Based on the words of the Mishnah, Rav Papa is going to challenge and say that Rav's words don't fit properly into the Mishnah. Let's read it inside. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa said the following: Lo deka matnitin. The Mishnah cannot be explained. Ella, rather, o kishmuel o Rav Yochanan. It only can be explained properly according to Shmuel and Rav Yochanan. Shmuel being the one who said that we're talking about where it's in the dark, Rav Yochanan saying it's around the corner. However, de'ika Rav, that if Rav was correct, my iria nitka, why is it only dealing with, the Mishnah is only dealing with the case of where a person tripped your patur, afilu shiber nami, even if you've broken on purpose also, he should be patur. Meaning the Mishnah limits itself to a specific scenario. The Mishnah says, and if someone trips over and it breaks, you're patur. That implies that if you smash it on purpose, you'd be chayav. Now that fits according to the other two opinions. According to Shmuel, if it's in the dark, you can't break it on purpose. That's why only if you trip, you're patur. According to Rav Yochanan, you can't smash it on purpose if it's around the corner. That's why only if you trip, you're patur. But according to Rav, if someone blocks your way with barrels, you should be able to smash it on purpose. So why would the Mishnah only say you're patur if you trip? That implies that if you break it on purpose, you'd be chayav, and therefore the Mishnah seems to read that not like Rav, that Rav's ukimta does not fit, and Rav must be incorrect. So to solve this problem, the Gemara basically does the following. This is Rava's way of defending his Rebbe, Rav. The Gemara is going to do the following. Really, Rava is going to do the following, as quoted in the Gemara, and say the following. Really, Rav is correct, and really, you'd be allowed to smash these things on barrels on purpose. So then why does the Mishnah only say if you trip your patur? Because of the seifa. This part of the Gemara is the reisha, right? If the person who trips on it and breaks it, they're patur. And the seifa finishes by saying, and if the person trips on it is injured by it, then the owner of the barrel has to pay. And what Rav is going to tell us is that seifa only makes sense if the person tripped by accident. But if you smash something on purpose and you injure yourself, you're not going to get paid for it. You might have been patur, you might be allowed to smash it, but if you get injured, you're considered to be injuring yourself. And therefore, since the seifa only makes sense if you trip, therefore the reisha only mentioned a situation where you trip, even though theoretically the reisha, meaning being patur for breaking it, also would apply. You'd be patur even if you broke it on purpose. Therefore, Rav might still be correct. Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei de Rava. Rav Zvid said in Rava's name the following: Hu hadin afilu shiber. Hu hadin, the same law, same halacha, afilu shiber, even if you broke it. So then, why does it say only if you tripped that you be patur? The high dekatani nitkal, that which it says nitkal, you tripped. Aidi debai lemidnei seifa. That's because it needed to mention in the Mishnah the seifa. What does the seifa say? This should be in quotes. V'im hu zakba bal hachavit chayav b'nizko. That's a quote from the seifa. And if he was injured by it, the person who tripped was injured by it, bal hachavit chayav b'nizko. The owner of the barrel is chayav to pay for the damages. And the davka nitkal, that's only if nitkal, the person tripped. Aval shiber, but if you broke it on purpose, you would not get paid if you got hurt if you broke it on purpose, even though you'd be patur for breaking it. My time, what's the reason for that? That would be hu dazik nafshe. It's considered to be you're injuring yourself. So therefore, since that's the Gemara's way of explaining why the seifa only makes sense if you tripped, because if you broke it on purpose, you would not get paid. Therefore, katani reisha nitkal. Therefore, it was taught in the reisha also only if you tripped. Okay, even though theoretically you would be allowed to break it on purpose. So you'd be patur even if you broke the barrels on purpose because they were in your way. Not only if you trip. And the reason the Mishnah only mentioned tripping is because of the seifa, which only makes sense in a case where you trip. Okay, now then the Gemara finishes off with one more approach to this whole situation. We started off assuming a person has to watch where they're going. We're going based on what a person's responsibility should be. Ula says no. It goes based on human nature, right? So Amri Bar Rava, it was said in the West. The West is Eretz Yisrael, because again we're writing this in Bavel. Eretz Yisrael is the West. Amri Bar Rava Mishmei de Rav Ula. It was said in Rav Ula's name. Lefisha, why are you patur for tripping on this barrel break? And don't you have to watch where you're going? Ula says no. Lefisha ein darkan shel bnei adam lepaneim b'derachim. It's not the way, the nature of a person. Right, because she'ein darkan, it's not the nature shel bnei adam of people liponein derechim to really watch so specifically where they're going. So yes, a person is responsible technically to watch where they're going. It's the right thing to do, but since that's not a person's nature, we can't hold them responsible. And a person putting their barrel out in public knows they're putting it in harm's way, and that's really why you're patur. Ula argues with this rule: a person has to watch where they're going, and therefore, according to Ula, you don't need to make any ukim. Does the Mishnah makes complete sense? You're patur for tripping on it because it's not human nature to watch where you're going, and therefore you're not responsible, and therefore the person who put it out there is patur. It's their fault, and you're patur for breaking it. And just to look at the Mishnah we're analyzing here, and just to show the difference between the Reish and the Seifa. So again, sorry about that. If someone places a barrel, an object in Rishud Rabim, someone else comes and trips on it and breaks it, you're patur. So that's the Reisha. Right there, you draw a line between the Reisha and the Seifa, and that's where we ask the question. 1 second. according to Rav, why in that Reisha does it only say if you tripped? According to Rav, you'd be allowed to break it on purpose. So if all you had was this Reisha, then that would be a deadly problem for Rav, and Rav would be incorrect. But look at the Seifim, Huzakba, if you were damaged by it, Balabayit Chayav B'Nisko. That the Balabayit has to pay for the injury that inflicted on the person who tripped on the barrel. Since this part only makes sense if you trip, right? Because as the Gemara pointed out, if you step on it on purpose and you injure yourself, you're not getting paid. You injured yourself. Therefore, the Reisha also only mentioned tripping as well, not for its own sake, but for the sake of the Seifa. Vinit kalba, and you tripped on it, you're patur. But that's only because of the Seifa. But really, if you broke it on purpose, also you'd be patur as well, like Rav Zukimta. So just to read and translate this from the top one more time. So the Mishnah says, if someone else came along and tripped on it and broke it, you'd be patur. The Gemara asks, on my patur, why are you patur? You have to watch where you're going. You should be chayav for breaking it. Amri the Rav Mishri the Rav student said, his name b'malei rishon rabim kol chaviyot. The Mishnah is talking about a case where you fill the Rishon Rabim completely with barrels, and that's why the person is patur for breaking it, because it's in his way. Shmuel said ba'afela shanu. It's talking about in the dark. This whole law was taught only in the dark, where you can't watch where you're going. Rav Yochanan Amar b'Keren Zavid. It's talking about where it's around the corner. 3 ukimtas, which would explain why you're patur, that you don't have to watch where you're going, or you couldn't watch where you're going. Rav Papa says challenges now. He's going to challenge Rav. Rav Papa says the following: Lo deka matit, and the Mishnah can't be explained. Ella o Shmuel o Rebbe, only like Shmuel or like Rebbe, Rav Yochanan. But if you want to explain like Rav, my iri nitka, why is it only talking about tripping? Afilu shiber nami. My iri means why is it dealing, right? Why is it dealing with tripping? Afilu shiber nami. Even if you broke it on purpose, also the same halacha should apply. So Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei the Rav. Rav Zvid says in Rava's name. Rava is Rav's student, so it makes sense why he'd defend him. Hu adin afilu shiber. No, the halacha would also apply that if you break it on purpose, you'd be patur, just like Rav would say. So v'hai dekatani nitkal. So that which it only taught in the Mishnah that you tripped, ID, that's because the bai lemitnei seifa, since it had to teach in the Mishnah since it had to teach in the Seifa about tripping, meaning Huzakba Balabayit Chayav V'Nisko, that's the Seifa which says if you're damaged by it, the owner of the barrel has to pay for if you're injured by it, has to pay for the Chayav V'Nisko has to pay for the injuries, the damages. The Davka Nitkal, that only applies if you trip by accident. Aval Shiber Lo, but if you broke it on purpose, it wouldn't apply. My time, why? What's the reason? Why would it not apply if you broke it on purpose? That you get paid and you got injured, you have to pay. The owner of the barrel would pay you for the injury. Who dazik nafshay? You're injuring yourself. You're the one who stomped down hard on this barrel instead of breaking it a different way. So therefore, katani reisha nitkal. That's why the reisha also had to mention tripping, because the seifa only makes sense in a case of tripping. You want the whole thing to flow. Since the whole mission should flow, it's one case. That's why it did it that way. But really, technically, in the reisha's halacha, that you're patur for breaking it, would also apply if you did it on purpose. Amri b'marava mishmei de Rav Ula. It was said they said in the West, in Israel, in the name of Rav Ula, why are you patur in this whole case? Don't you have to watch where you're going? Rav Ula says, no, what are you getting to all these ukimtas and worrying about that? He says, Lafi she'ein, it's why you patur, Lafi, because she'ein darchan shnei b'nei adam. It's not the nature of people to watch where they're going so carefully. And since it's not in the nature of people to watch where they're going so carefully, you're not required to go against your nature, the natural, what human beings naturally do, and watch where you're going so specifically. And therefore, that's why you're patur, period. It makes sense that you be patur. The owner put it out there. You're not responsible to watch where you're going. And forget all these ukimtas. This Mishnah makes sense at face value. Since